Good morning, good afternoon, LinkedIn friends, HubSpot Nation. Welcome to a special unboxing episode here with Ryan and Joe to unbox some of Revenue Hub, specifically talking about contracts and billing and migration and all of the, as much as we can get to in about 45 minutes, the ins and outs of that. Thanks for joining us, fellas.
Excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
So when it comes to, let me just ask this, why migrations, financial data, it's not as easy as everything else has been for us in HubSpot, is it?
It's certainly not. So I'll level set by just giving a little introduction. I'm the associate product manager on the Revenue Hub team in charge of billing migrations onto Revenue Hub contracts. And then also accounting integrations, specifically Xero and QuickBooks. I think it'd be helpful to start by just level setting on some of the terminology. Obviously, We've had a great rebranding, Revenue Hub, right? We used to be Commerce Hub. And when we were Commerce Hub, really we had the subscription object as like the brain that would handle recurring billing, saying what to bill and when. We got a lot of great feedback around kind of gaps in the subscription object. And ultimately we decided, really what our customers are asking us for is the contract object, something that's much more appropriate for a rep-assisted sale, although we're not limiting it to rep-assisted sales by any means, that can accurately project booked, billed, and paid revenue into the future and in the past. I think back when we were Commerce Hub and we were using subscriptions, one of the things that would always come up on customer calls was like, I just want to see my MRR 6 months out and know like what's going to be the upgrade, what's going to be the downgrade. And we could really never provide that report with the subscription object. With the contract object, we can. And so what that means is now that we've rebranded it as Revenue Hub, the billable brain, the engine that determines what to bill when, is now the contract. And we'll still have subscriptions on there. They'll still be represented. They'll basically be like read-only representations of single recurring line items. But if you wanted to say, hey, this is $1,000 a month, but actually 3 months from now, it should kick up to $2,000 a month, that will all be handled through the contract object going forward. And so people are really excited because we're finally offering those, those MRR and ARR waterfall reports that everyone's always wanted. But they're probably billing in other systems, right? And so how are they going to migrate onto this new and improved Revenue Hub without disrupting their billing processes? And that's really what the billing migrations tooling is all about, is a way to provide a seamless entry path and migration path onto these new tools. And that's what I'm excited to talk to you folks about today.
Yeah, it is a very exciting time. I'm so glad we landed on the word revenue. So glad. I think if this is new for you in the HubSpot ecosystem, it needs to be as simple as now we can have a unified revenue view in HubSpot in a way that really hasn't been available in most systems outside of the $1 million implementations of SAP and ERP systems, but in a manageable way that still includes a top of funnel marketing data to actually get a revenue view that we really haven't had before, supporting forecasting and all this stuff. So really excited that we got to the word revenue. But as we're going to talk about today, it includes the finance org, right? Which doesn't always mesh well with the let's say freewheeling and dealing sales and marketing data, right? So as I'm excited for you to take us through what migration looks like and maybe what it doesn't look like.
Yeah,
would be a way to put it.
I think that's a great way to put it. So I have a few things prepared. If it's all right, maybe I can share my screen and take you through quickly, and then we can open up and just have a more informal chat about some of the questions on y'all's mind, because of course, you're on the front lines. You're working through these complex implementations, and I'm sure you're gonna be able to poke holes or talk about like the best strategic way to approach some of the things that I'll walk you through. So I'm not going to be too slide heavy, I promise, but I'm a visual guy. It helps me even just formulate my thoughts. So are y'all seeing this here?
Yes, we are.
Okay, perfect. So now that we've kind of established what the terminology is, I want to just take us through at a really high level what our billing migration onto Revenue Hub contracts tooling is. It's going to be based off of contract imports. And so just a cool, important thing to call out here, there is the ability to import contracts that are non-billable. That would not be a migration. That's basically just a way to get data insights in. But those contracts won't send invoices or charge a customer automatically. But you can also use the contract imports tool to migrate billing. And ultimately what's going to happen if you go that path is you would import. Then once it's imported, the contract will be in a draft state. So it's not just like you're going to import a contract and suddenly it's going to start charging your customers. You have this step to review the draft, make sure, okay, this looks good, this tracks with what we were doing in the legacy system. And then you can take an intentional step to activate an individual contract or a series of contracts. And then once that's done, HubSpot will begin billing according to how you structure that CSV import. And then there is a kind of additional step, which is, okay, you've got to deprecate whatever processes were happening in the legacy system so that to ensure that your customers aren't billed from two systems. Now, a couple quick things. Really, the type of migration will determine the import shape and the complexity. I don't want to spend too much time here, but I just want to call out like the two key questions that I always ask when scoping out a migration. Are you migrating a contract that sends invoices that your customers pay, be it by check or through our invoice itself? Or are you migrating contracts that charge payment methods automatically? We can support both. However, if it is the latter, that means there is a payment method token migration as part of the process. So it's a little bit more complex, just something worth calling out there. And then the second key question is, do you want to see revenue change events from the legacy system inside those waterfall reports in HubSpot? And so I think a good example here is like, let's say you started a contract in the legacy system for $100 a month on January 1st. And on March 1st, that went up to $300 a month. Do you want to see that $200 upgrade from the legacy system inside the waterfall reports in HubSpot? If you do, we can accommodate that, but that's just going to adjust the shape of your import a little bit. If you're fine just seeing like, hey, $300 a month, that's all I need to see. I don't really need to have a complete picture of what happened in the old system, which a lot of customers opt for, then that's a slightly simpler migration path. Now, a big thing to call out here is that a technically successful migration does not equal a wholly successful migration. And so the key thing about this is, with an import, we're going to require certain associations and certain properties. So for the contract imports, we're going to require line items and a contact. But you probably want to associate a deal, maybe a company, maybe there's some tax questions you want to accommodate for. Maybe you haven't even created the products in your product library that those line items are associated with. And so the big call out here is really just, hey, just because you migrated something does not mean that you've set your team up for success. And then I think this is really just to kind of drill into that point a little bit more, right? Here are like four kind of key things that I would say come up. And I'd be really curious to hear what you two think and what you're finding on the front lines. But I would say these are the biggest things that are a little bit, additional requirements for a successful migration. Portal readiness, do you have all the proper properties, all, the product library and all that sort of stuff? Training, right? Once you migrate, once you're live, is your team enabled to actually use the new system? CRM and product model, we were just reviewing that, custom line item decisions, taxes, things of that nature. Number 3, I would say, is a really big one though, because I think it's a pretty safe assumption, whatever your legacy billing system was doing, it was probably speaking to your ERP or accounting system that your finance team it's sacred for your finance team. Post migration, do you have your HubSpot portal set up in a way to automatically sync to those systems in a way that it's not going to be disruptive to those teams? So for QuickBooks and Xero, those are the integrations that we own. We have solutions there that we're really confident in, and they're getting better every day. Definitely check those product updates for anything related to QuickBooks and Xero. I'm excited for some of the progress we've made there. But for other ERPs and accounting systems, that is something you're going to need to scope out preemptively. And then finally, I would say cutover orchestration, right? This tool that we've built is third-party agnostic. So we can migrate anything onto HubSpot. But that also means we're not touching anything in that third-party system. So if you need to shut things down or disable any automated email reminders, things of that nature, that's also part of the migration process. And so I said I was going to be really short with the slides. Hopefully I stuck to that. I want to kind of just open it back up and hear what y'all are thinking. And sorry for this infinity view there. Oh,
good.
Looks like you got,
you mind
got
actually,
it.
I'm the guy that told you no slides, but I want you to bring back up that last slide.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because even though I said financial data and migration, doesn't play well with marketing, sales stuff, it's the same deal though. Like, I think there always has required some strategic layer of migrating anything into HubSpot is never just copy paste. Like, and anybody that's tried to do that with marketing source data, websites, sales engagement data, like that, what I heard you describing was like revenue engagement data, historical engagement, like what has been happening. Of course, if you want to see that, you have to bring it over, just like you would want to have marketing touchpoint data, sales touchpoint data. Like, so it's the same kind of process that you need to describe to be successful. It's a different description that you need to be speaking the language of finance. And sometimes these very specific systems like accounting or ERPs to have it make any sense, right? And I remember last time we were on a couple years ago when you guys were getting super serious with the QuickBooks integration, we talked about how QuickBooks and like market leaders like have instilled best practices like related to accounting and back office stuff. And because of that, there's never any mention of data models or which objects you should be using. Like, now the reason you're bringing this stuff into HubSpot is generally because I need to send an invoice to 10 different people because that's how they operate. I need to be super flexible until the moments that I don't. And I need to be easy to maintain both sides. So when you look at this list, most people, when they hear the words migration, it's like, here's a spreadsheet or just plug it in. And then we go right to number 4. Let's just like cut over, orchestrate. And we haven't discussed anything in between. And like, it can be simpler to understand if you apply the same principles on the marketing and sales side, where it's very rarely just bring your data over. It's like the process changes, the team starts thinking about things differently. And that's why these first 3 steps are just, so important in my opinion.
I couldn't agree more. I think there's like a central paradox where the impetus behind a migration is very often what detracts from the ease of migration, because you want to migrate because the new data model, the new system that you're migrating to offers more than your legacy system. And so there has to be some translation. There has to be a little work in bringing the old system onto the new system, because the new system can do more. So there's things that the old system just couldn't account for that you'll have to make some decisions around. And that's why I really think like this 3 or, it's really 4 steps, but the first 3 steps are really the key thing before you migrate anything. Is, do I have is the portal properly structured? Is my team changed? Is my team trained? What about the CRM? Beyond just portal readiness, is the actual structure of my CRM appropriate? And then you've got to get that finance buy-in. And I think you kind of hit the nail on the head where we want it to be a fast and more efficient system billing out of HubSpot and syncing to the accounting system. But we also want to understand that that is a sacred space. And we do not want to have any of the efficiencies we've added come off to the finance stakeholders as a messiness that could be synced downstream into their ERP. And we do have a lot of guardrails in place now, particularly with the updates for the QuickBooks and Xero integration, that do really put the onus on merchants to take a little bit more decision about how data is syncing across to those systems, because it's actually been really an interesting learning. I think everybody in the industry and tech broadly is like move fast, automated. And what we found really when we're talking about the ERP or the accounting system connection, people do want to have a say over how that data is syncing. They're actually okay for a little bit more of a manual process if it means that their finance team can rest assured it's going to meet their requirements.
Question for you on the concept of the contract in relation to QuickBooks and Xero, right? Are you finding people migrating contracts from those systems into HubSpot and kind of changing where the invoicing starts?
It's a great question. So I would typically say when somebody is migrating from one of those systems, it's almost never the case that that's the only system they're migrating from. They're likely, they have some document tool, some e-sign document tool that actually has the terms of the contract. And then they have some manual process where they're translating that into the billing model of those accounting systems. And that translation is never really as simple as take this and turn it into their equivalent of a contract. It's typically okay, I'm going to set up this recurring billing. I'm going to set up this estimate, which I'll use for milestone-based billing. And so it's almost never like a one-to-one. And very frequently, I'll find that folks are actually not migrating directly from those accounting systems, but a third-party billing platform. I'm not going to name any names, but that is already syncing to those platforms. And so then in that scenario, it's more about okay, I've got this system syncing to QuickBooks or Xero. Now I want this system to sync in the same way. But I would say it's very rarely just coming over straight from the accounting system.
That's kind of what I thought, because there isn't really this, it all kind of also is built the contract, from as I understand it, is built from the line items, right? That's the core object now. That's the core piece of information that drives everything, and the contract kind of wraps all of that and is informed by those line items. So I think in bullet number 2 of your sheet was get your product, your pipeline structure, your product library, and your custom line item decisions. And the amount of hubs that I've been in, right, that have used line items, right, in varying ways, in ways that they like and don't like, whether they use quotes or don't use quotes, right? It's just been, I think, misunderstood and inflexible, but now it's critical to this entire new object. And I'm really excited to learn more about how people have used line items, and then mostly importantly, translating that using your migrations tool, because we got to trace back that history in whatever system they're in and map it to legacy line items or their new product inventory if they decide to go down if they decide to go and rebuild their product library now that they've learned all of these things. So
I think it is absolutely the atomic object that people need to index on going into a migration is, okay, what is a true product that should be in the library? And then once you've defined that, okay, there should really, in an ideal migration, there is no custom line item, right? Everything can be traced back to some product that's already been brought over. But I think because of the fact that you're migrating from different systems and there's not always that one-to-one connection, there will be times for certain third-party migrations where a custom line item makes sense. Maybe because you were doing something in the past that you can't replicate, or maybe it's best not to try and replicate on the new data model. And so in those scenarios, if you are making those custom line item decisions, you really got to make sure that you're being thoughtful about it so that you have that audit trail if you want to look back. And so that's actually a really good call out. One of the things that's nice about our billing migration tooling is that we require you to create a unique ID for the contract. Now, there's like a very practical element of this where a contract could be represented in multiple rows on a single CSV. And so having that unique ID allows us to say, okay, these 4 rows are part of this one contract. But one thing that we found that really alleviates the migration process or makes it more efficient for a lot of folks is they've just started using that import unique ID as the record ID of the billing process they're migrating from the legacy system. So it might be like,
Right.
this is the ID of the subscription from the old system. And then that makes it really easy to just say, okay, I want to look inside HubSpot. This is the contract. And then there's a property on there that tells me this is what the record ID was prior to migration. And so for those custom line items workarounds, it creates a much clearer audit trail.
Line items have grown up. They've
Line
come a long
items.
way. Chris's
I
favorite
won't get into my thoughts on line items, but it is important that just the understanding of how line items work across different software categories, I think in general, is a challenge. But I like what you guys are doing in terms of helping turn it into a first-class object, while trying to avoid some of the pitfalls of it being an island object everywhere that looks the same, talks the same, and then reports out like dramatically differently because we made it over here instead of over there. What can we see in HubSpot to help us understand, how this stuff is working?
Am I still sharing my screen here?
Yes, you are.
Oh, perfect. So like I said, this is going to be based off of the imports tool for contracts. One thing I will call out, this is fully functional with the imports API. So you could have a more programmatic approach. But basically, I've got a bunch of contracts in here. I do a lot of testing, so this is a messy portal. Hopefully you're not seeing any errors on your end. But once you've imported contracts for migration, billable contracts, then essentially you'll see they're created in a draft state. And you'll have this CTA at the top that says, okay, you can continue your migration. Now, one of the things we do here, so when you import a contract, it's going to check against the CRM data model for contracts and say, yep, this is good, it can be imported. Then there's a second check against our billing engine, specifically for billable contracts that you're migrating. And there may be scenarios in that instance where we say, hey, you know what, this might match the CRM data model, but like from a billing perspective, there's something wrong here, so we can't migrate this. In this scenario, you can just basically come over to this needs attention section, and then you can click delete. We're going to force a CSV download so that you have a clear breakdown of what those errors were and what those kind of unique IDs were. And we really found, since people were reusing those legacy system IDs, we wanted to make it easy to just clear it out so you could continue to use that same ID going forward. But once you've got everything really structured and ready to migrate, you can just as easily as this, click one or many contracts and click migrate. Now, a couple things to call out here is before migration, it will be in the draft state. And as you can see, I can click inside here and I can start to get a sense of, okay, does this look good? Yeah, that's the effective date, the start date, the end date. What's the billing schedule? What's billing next? This one, obviously, it's in the past and I never activated it, so there is no billing schedule here, but you would see the billing schedule for something that's actually scheduled to kick off in the future. And then you would basically be able to just click migrate one contract. Now, since this is starting on the 31st and today's the 4th of August, that won't work. But once you click activate or migrate, it's going to look like this. It's going to be a real active contract inside of HubSpot. you'll have the billing schedule, and then you'll have the ability to go through a change quote, a renewal quote. It's going to respect the data model just like any other contract would. Now, when it comes to those MRR reports that everybody is always excited about, you will not see those on our MRR reports. You won't see the events on these MRR reports until the contract's activated. So these are built by kind of immutable events. And we really found that if we were populating these with draft contracts, it really caused more harm than good. People were getting confused. They weren't sure what was coming from what. And so really the only key thing that you won't see until post-migration or post-activation are these reports. And that's one of the reasons we say, if you want to bring over those change events from the legacy system, if you really want to have a methodical migration where this report looks exactly like the one in your legacy system, we recommend using a sandbox and just activating or migrating contracts in the sandbox. They won't actually bill anything in sandboxes. So you can see these here, and then just transferring that over through a separate import to the actual portal.
Is there a precedent for this kind of behavior in HubSpot in terms of starting to link records in a way where I can actually see what it's going to look like in a record of HubSpot, but I have not? Like, that's very interesting, and I don't recall, because if that did happen, like, that would make every other migration like infinitely easier, because it's often we try to get the teams to think about what their process, what they want the process to look like. But the moment they actually see it inside of HubSpot, they start getting ideas left and right for process improvement. And this part, like, is the hardest part of HubSpot to explain until you're in it, right? Like, because like you guys said, like, there's often multiple systems, like, and sometimes spreadsheets are a part of those systems. And to get somebody to understand, like, oh no, that's going to be right. It's going to be right on the page. So now you don't need like X, Y, and Z to happen because it's just right there, right?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't think there is a precedent, but I think we really wanted to be the exception, just because of how high impact this is, and how like, if there's anything you want to measure 3 times and cut once for, it's a billing migration. But I'm happy to hear you like it. One thing I will say is we're planning to unify the entire contract import experience around that draft state, because we have gotten such good feedback on it. And so today, if you're in the contract imports public beta, but you're not in the contract migrations beta, then you're just basically able to import contracts. And today, those will just go straight to active. But we got such good feedback around, hey, I like having this draft step, that we're going to be expanding it. So any contract you're importing, regardless if it's billable or non-billable, will have a draft state you can review before clicking activate.
Was that table, like, what I noticed is like you had the list of contracts kind of in that draft mode that you were going to review, and the action was to delete them and re-import them after fixing. But is the table an inline edit table as well, to where I can go through and make the edits in the table?
It is, but just for specific billing required properties. So it's a really nice segue to billing override start date is one of the key properties that determine that should be leveraged for a migration. And basically what it is like, okay, let's say you had a contract that started in the legacy system on January 1st, and it's going to just bill at the 1st of every month going forward. Well, I want to execute the migration today, August 4th, but I want to give HubSpot a very explicit call out, like, do not bill anything prior to this date. And so this allows for an easier coordination with the other systems. So the billing override start date is a migration specific property where you essentially say to HubSpot, from this date on, you can bill. And so you can adjust the billing override start date on that particular page where you're seeing. You can also adjust the payment method ID for migrations where you're bringing over payment tokens. But those are the only 2 that you can adjust in that inline editor.
And when we think about So I've just migrated contracts. I've set the billing date to be in the future, right? Like, what happens in HubSpot when that billing date arrives? And like, is it like, is it time sensitive? Is it 12 a.m., 6 a.m.? Do you define those rules? And then like, what can HubSpot customers expect HubSpot to do? Is that send an invoice, notify the owner of the contract? What's all the downstream implications of that date?
Yeah, so I would say billing override start date is not necessarily the date that will first be billed. It's the date where HubSpot will begin billing for the line items on that contract. So if you've got several line items, one on the 3rd, one on the 5th, one on the 9th, I'm just coming up with random examples here. And then you set the billing override start date on the 1st, nothing will happen on the 1st. But those line items that are subsequently going to be billed on the next days will be billed actively. Now, you can set the billing override start date as the same date as the first line item date.
Okay.
So you can do that. It will work. There's no issues there. I've tested it many times. That being said, I typically recommend putting it a day or 2 days in advance so you can have a little bit more thoughtful coordination with the legacy system.
And it brings you back, though. The line item is the atomic entity, right, in which all billing is driven from. The contract is just the container, and informs when the innermost object kind of gets kind of brought into the picture.
Exactly.
So before we started, Ryan asked a really good question that I asked you to hold off on answering, and that is simply or not simply, like what does a successful migration look like?
It's a great question. I think a successful migration is not number of contracts migrated. It's not, was it all done in a month or was it done over a period of time? I think a successful migration is one where you really check all those key boxes of, okay, are product IDs properly set up? Is the CRM properly set up? Did I properly deprecate this? Is the ERP or accounting system going to be properly structured? And then I would say success for me is the team that's going to actually be acting around these bought in and excited? Because if they're trained and they're jumping in and you've got 1,000 contracts to migrate, I think you can say it's successful just after the first 20 if everybody's like, oh yeah, I'm seeing this, I'm bought in. And then getting the remainder is, that's easy. That's just logistics because you've already proven it out. And so I think success is honestly a little bit more qualitative than quantitative. And I think it's really about the team that's going to be using these tools. Do they feel comfortable? Are they trained up on them? Are they seeing the value of this new process? And then are those finance folks accounted for? No pun intended. Do they feel like, with the small cohort that we migrated to start with, are they seeing any disruption to their process downstream? Or are they like, no, this looks good. No issues here. And so, yeah, of course, like a successful migration, it covers everything. But I really think you start to see the signs of success much earlier than that with just a small cohort of migrations.
Yeah.
Do you notice? Oh, sorry, Chris, you can keep going.
I think like when we can set that as a North Star for success, like it can dramatically change the way that you approach like getting the migration done. Because like your step one was about like data ownership was in there. And this came up last week talking about revenue agent, right? As like HubSpot in general is making it easier than ever to get paid for the value that you provide. And if you can position it like that to finance, they will get all in much faster than however else you've been positioning it. And when you can tie it to, of course, communication, making that easier, like, yes, if people know they got to pay, they will pay. If they know what they're paying for and when, they will pay faster. So if you can switch, because honestly, as we migrate, they need to own the process. They have to own because they're responsible for it. It's their remit, right? And if you start to open the door for them owning it, all of a sudden you only need 20, 15, 10 for smart folks to just get it immediately. And then they are the ones driving any errors that start to flow through. Meanwhile, they learn the system, they understand how it works. And once they have that, once you can empower them in that way, they will become some of the fastest champions of HubSpot like you've ever seen, like in the org, right? Which makes sense because you start closing that collections gap, making that list smaller. Like, man, people like, no surprise, people like that. They like that part.
Absolutely.
The team
So what?
enablement. Yeah, I was gonna just kind of talk about like the team enablement is critical. What I wanted to know about in your experience with people using all of these tools is it like prototype what net new contract experience needs to be like, right? To build that muscle, to build the capability of everything, knowing that migrations will be like a secondary motion. Like it's kind of like proving out like, hey, migrations are possible. Before we migrate anything, let's prove that like you guys like this experience, right? Is that kind of more or less what the direction is?
It's a good question. I think it depends on what pain is most felt by the customer if with their current system. So if it's customer success that really is the impetus behind the migration, I think before getting folks bought in on like the net new deal all the way through to contract, if it's customer success that's the problem, I would say start with the migration for a small cohort. Say, hey, let's pick a particular team. We know maybe some of the accounting and ERP things won't be solved, but that'll be like a short-term thing to prove out this pilot. And then let's get this customer success team up and running with some contracts we migrate. And then if they're bought in, then you can go back and say, okay, let's do the sales-led motion from, you know, the very first quote all the way through to the contract, then the handoff to CS. And I think it's very like really what resonates is like, what is the most succinct pain people are feeling? And then building the rollout around that. Because the tools here, I mean, you don't have to migrate everything all at once. And so it's very flexible. Like maybe we start with migration, or maybe we completely need to change up, you know, we need to train this entire new sales team on a CPQ tool, and then migration is kind of like a later afterthought. I think it's very dependent on what the impetus behind that conversation is.
Would you say the CS team approach is more focused on non-billable contracts, just getting like, what is this customer paying in that moment without breaking any current billing systems? Is that more or less kind of what you're suggesting?
You could even do it for billable. I mean, I think it depends very much on what those issues are, because if you're doing the non-billable approach, it's just a snapshot in time of what that contract is. And if the CS team is dealing with issues around, oh, you know what, we prorated this and nobody documented it, well, then that's something that you really couldn't prove out unless you actually migrated. And so I think it's kind of contingent on that.
My head always goes like, it goes like, once we do this, then we kind of got to do this, then we got to go do this. And like, because it's so connected to so many other systems. It's why I bring Chris into many of my engagements to help bite-sized chunk it. Like, no, we really can, like, it can be this simple. And
let's go there, because like, and I can dig into your expertise here, both of you. Like so discovery aside, we always want to hear what the customer is feeling, but ultimately there's some pretty obvious pains that we're trying to solve for here. Like what are the top one or two pains that we believe that this move will solve for?
I can tell you the top one is frustration with their current system. And I think this is a double-edged sword, because it people that are in that scenario are very much like, I want to migrate immediately. I want to migrate fast. And it's a double-edged sword, because as we've just talked through, there's a lot of things that it's like, maybe we shouldn't move fast on. But I can say that that's almost always the impetus behind, like, my current system is just broken, and it can be broken any number of ways. But that is really, I think, the key thing that we're solving for is like, okay, we've got a better system. You've already, maybe you've started adopting some of the tools related to it. Maybe you haven't, but you're bought in on, like, this is the solution you're looking for. Okay, here's how we can make that transition as seamless as possible.
What are they frustrated with usually, Brian?
I can speak from current example right now. Like, current one that we're working through, right, is reporting, right? They want to be able to report, like revenue recognition is the big kind of report that they want to be able to do, and MRR reporting, like you showed. And the thing is like, they're built on, like, the current system. It's really challenging. It's like, there's a lot of stakeholders, right, all wanting different things, speaking different languages, right? And the data is dispersed in kind of the different systems, and it's really challenging to bring everyone to agree on what the path forward is.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I don't know if that answered your question in terms of the pain, but it's like, the data's everywhere and everyone wants different things and no one is communicating effectively. So it's like, I think contract solves for that. Like, that's the pain. Contracts has given us a path for, looks like, migration, right? Migration of your current contracts with historical reporting gives us MRR reports, and then gives us either the sales side or the customer success side of the visibility we all need. And it's
that
it's
last you got there. Finally got that visibility. We have to, like, that's how I think we simplify this for folks, because you just named, when all the different stakeholders want something different, because they all have their own systems where they have gotten something exactly like they want it, and this is a risk to that. But when they talk about it, it almost always starts with, I want to see.
Mm-hmm.
I want to see this, whether it's customer engagement, whether it's behavior changes, whether it's billing changes. I want to see this and I want to trust it. Right. And we can only give them that in HubSpot if they also understand these other things. It's like, yeah, we can show you a pretty contracts like record, but if you don't understand how the sales team is doing their thing, and that needs to be associated with this, because we didn't have to worry about that before, because you guys manually transformed it on the way to the other system. And if we can get everybody to agree on this unified revenue view situation, then we can give them some credit of all that transformation that they've had, super complex, and they figured it out, right? Sometimes with the most ridiculous spreadsheets you've ever seen in your life. So to suggest that we need to keep it simple in Hub, it's just not reality. It's a complex thing, and those people are capable of managing complexity. They just have to be, it has to match expectations as they do it. And it's easy for everyone to forget, like you mentioned, like, oh, we're just going to migrate. Actually, this system is doing this. My spreadsheet over here is doing this. Accounting's doing this. And I ask them directly every time I got to do, like, all of this stuff is just a natural, like, habit that has grown over years, which it's harder for them to call that into frustration, versus they almost certainly aren't having the visibility, they need in those moments. So I think, like, at least I've had some success of bringing teams together in a way where it's like, yeah, because you don't know how it's necessarily going to solve every issue. You just know that unified visibility inherently does, right? Because processes just start to melt away when they've been built around the fact that I can't see what I need to see right now. And that's the only reason this tool, this spreadsheet, this whatever exists. And now it doesn't have to.
Yeah, I think just to add as like a concluding point, I said the biggest impetus was, people are frustrated with their old system. I think that was an incorrect statement. It's that they're frustrated with their old systems. It's almost always multiple disparate systems that is exactly what Ryan highlighted. That is the impetus behind a migration. Is like, I have just too many things going on. I've got my sales team here. I've got my analytics team here. I've got my accounting team here. I want one thing. And that is almost like, that is it. More than my billing migration, my billing tool is frustrating. It's like all of the different things built around my current billing tool that's frustrating.
Yeah. And when you can show them unified customer view right next to unified revenue view, which has been a pipe dream like for a long time, right? To put those two things together. Now we can in HubSpot. You start to see behavior change. Like once they believe it, right? They know they have a part in that and they want to own some of that process. And that often helps you get the leadership, agreement that you need to start to push down across these different teams to start, working better together. So thanks for making it easier, Joe.
Thanks for supporting us on this. I'm just super appreciative of the time today, and this certainly will not be the last of these. So I'm looking forward to keeping the conversation going.
Well, we will do that. We love Revenue Hub over here at Value First. I don't say that lightly. That unified revenue view has never existed before, like it can in HubSpot now. So very excited. We're going to continue having these things, and I'm sure we'll see you back sometime.
Awesome. Take care, folks.
Thanks, everybody.